Warrior Mindset Podcast. We are your guide as you make your way through life, getting better 1% every day. We believe that life is lived and true victory won through adversity. Nothing easy is ever worth it. We believe in the warrior ethos and support those that choose to walk that path.
So you were just here, like literally on another show too.
Yeah, that's a different place though. It's a different universe. What are you talking about? Pulling back the curtain, Gene.
But you gave me that book, The 4 Agreements, and I said, if I read it, will you come and talk about it? So yeah, there you are.
Sweet.
It was a quick read. What do you have there?
I have the 4 Agreements, the full book, but then like someone also gave me like a little tiny one that like just cuts it down. So
it's like tiny text.
But no, it's not the full book.
Okay.
It just like it cuts. See, it's this big
I got
text.
you.
Old people. Can you read that?
I can't read it.
No. But it's because I didn't manage to read the book again before I came on here, but I have this in my stuff because it's really good, because it's a book that I found a couple of years ago, probably listening to another podcast, and I've tried to read it every year since reading it the first time, because I think it helps me center myself and focus on what's important and what's under my control, because there's so much in our lives that are not under our control, but we certainly spend a ton of energy thinking about and worrying about and complaining about or whatever. So it's just a really good thing for me to go back and read this book once a year and center myself.
Do you have any other books that are like that for you?
Not at this moment. Not off the top of my head.
That's just one you keep at hand. That's cool.
Yeah.
It's good to have a little creed or like something. I just made a post about like, do you have a personal creed? You know, and it was this Navy SEAL guy had like one that he'd developed, and it was cool. I mean, it makes me feel like, yeah, dude, I'll take that one. But I imagine this is kind of similar for you. So yeah, I read it. I thought it was very cool in terms of what you just said. I have traditionally had a problem with that, like overthinking things. I'm not necessarily an overthinker, but I have problem. Like I start thinking, like, what did I do wrong? Or, worrying about all this other stuff to the point where in the past, it's like shut me down.
Yeah.
I don't know if you were like that.
I mean, I think I still can be. It was good for me to read through these because there's some of these agreements. Do we want to just like name the agreements first?
Yeah, let's do it. Can you do it off the top of your head?
Yeah. So of course, I've been reading it every year for like 5 years now. The first one is "May your words be impeccable," which is meaning like not sinless. I like that they use the linguistic root of impeccable being without sin, because I'm a linguist, so it helps me remember it. And it means not talking ill of other people, but a big one is not talking ill of yourself internally or externally. Don't take things personally, which is huge, right?
Yeah.
Don't make assumptions, and then always do your best. And it was interesting with me rereading this, because I think in the past I struggled and still struggle with the first one of "May your words be impeccable." I wouldn't necessarily call myself a gossip, but I think I struggle with negative internal talk, just being super hard on myself beyond what anyone else would be. And so that was a real struggle, and I've been working better to like reframe negative thoughts, because I feel like if you just say stop thinking negative thoughts, that's like an impossible barrier, and it leads to suppression, and suppression is not necessarily a good thing.
Well, you have like 2 lives, right? Well, you probably have more than that, but I mean, you're a professional that runs your own business, but you're also a professional athlete.
Yeah,
you are. Come on. What's the difference? How does that affect you sort of in different places? Like, because I can understand the athletic realm, like in the middle of what you call a performance or whatever, like positive self-talk. And I coach people to that. Like, hey, you need to change how you are, like you don't repeat to yourself, like, don't screw this up. You're going to mess this up. You're going to mess it. That's negative. That's going to kind of feed that negative monster.
Yeah. I think in the world of endurance sports, where you're out there for like, 3 hours or more, you're you're absolutely going to have the negative thoughts come in. Like,
Mhm.
you're just going to be like, I feel like crap. Like, why am I doing this? You
How
know?
can you not?
And so my coaches always say these are going to come. So, like, don't be upset about it. But for my first Ironman, I actually didn't have a lot of low thoughts. I think I do better in events where I have no expectations to live up to. Like, oh, I did this event last year in this time, so I want to do better.
Okay.
If I go into something and I have no expectations, I just am there. I'm more present. And for my first Ironman, I kept telling myself, what would make you feel good right now? So instead of thinking like, oh, my foot really hurts right now,
Right.
you know,
Right. I mean, yeah. I mean,
right? I would be like, it would make me feel really good just to shuffle a little bit in my seat or to just sit up on my bike for like 30 seconds. I already have things like drinking every 10 minutes on the bike and the run that
Hmm.
keep me occupied. I do walk during my run so I can,
Sure.
look forward to that if I'm feeling really rough. My first Ironman, I had not a lot of low thoughts. And then my second Ironman, last year, I had all the bad thoughts. And so I really, like, mile 15 of the marathon, had to dig myself out of that because I was feeling bad, like, I couldn't run,
Mm.
my abdomen was all cramped up, and I didn't know why. I've been very lucky that I haven't experienced a lot of, like, GI stress, which is very common in endurance athletics, but I
Sure.
just haven't had it. And I wouldn't necessarily say it was GI stress, but it was just my entire abdomen was just all cramped up.
We're halfway through a marathon.
Yeah, and I
The run
told
is last, right?
yeah, the
Yeah.
run's last.
Yeah.
But, I had to the people out there are really encouraging. Most of them are. All the women are really encouraging. Sometimes the guys can be a bit nasty out there. But one girl came up next to me, she's like, "You're looking great, how do you feel?" And she gave me a salt pill, which can help, and that did help for a
Okay.
little while, for about 10 miles. But then I told myself, "Look, you're still moving forward." I'd seen other people who were not moving forward, who were getting, like, taken off the course, and,
Mm.
like, I'd passed one of my friends who's a very strong athlete, and she said she had been vomiting from, like, mile 90 on the bike, right? And I'm like,
Ugh.
"You're not vomiting, right?
Right.
You're not in the porta john, right?" So thinking about
Yeah.
those things, like,
Right.
you're moving, you're not running, but you're moving, and
Mm.
you're just gonna get it done, and look at this beautiful place that you're at. And so yeah, but I mean, I still struggle. I think with the words being impeccable in like a personal sense, I realize that people, um, men and women, bond over gossip or bond over disliking someone
It's
else.
kind of fun.
Yeah. Yeah, it's hard not to get into
Mhm.
that. And
Mhm.
and it's a really fast way to bond with someone when
Yeah.
you're like, did you see what so and so
It's kind of
did?
like cheating, though,
Yeah.
in my opinion. Like, yeah.
Yeah, but it's interesting because the book brings up gossip specifically and says as children we watch adults do this, and so that's a
Mhm.
pattern that
Mhm.
we learn. We listen to our parents
Mhm.
gossip about other people, and so that's always something I need to
Mhm.
work on.
It is very hard, and you know, it like gossip's one thing, right? Like talking about some problem that some other person has, but even also just putting someone else down a little bit
Mhm.
behind their back. It's very hard to not do that.
Mhm.
Like, I would encourage anybody listening to sort of audit how many times a day they might do that.
Mhm.
It's really hard to be that person that's like, no, we're not going to do that here.
Yeah.
When you're around someone that's like that, though, that, you start to talk a little trash and they're like, yeah, we're not going to talk ill about these people. They don't say that, but they just kind of send you that vibe of like, this ain't going to float here. You kind of respect that person a little bit more.
I would hope so. I feel
I
like
do. I'm always like, damn.
yeah, I feel like I've been in situations where someone's tried to talk about
Mhm.
someone else, and I try and redirect the conversation,
Mhm.
and that's an awkward place to
How
be in.
about how about professionally? Because I can say that I can't remember any specific stories, but I can remember early on in my business, just talking shit about like the competition or who
Yeah.
I thought was, another firm in town that I thought was like, there's always there's companies that you're like going for projects at the same time together. And
Mhm.
I can recall being in a meeting with a client where we're pitching, and I know that they were pitching or had pitched whatever, and I'm kind of like, well, we're not going to be like them and like fuck you up,
Right.
you know.
Right.
And I feel like that always kind of bites you in the ass.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't actually been in many situations where I would have identified my competitors and maybe been in the same building to pitch something. So I haven't had that specifically, but
I will admit to it.
but what I will say I've realized is a red flag, and I know that you will know this is a red flag as well, is speaking to a new prospect and they are ripping their current
Yeah.
developer or digital marketer a new one.
There's
about
always two
how
sides to a
bad
story.
they are. And you're like, oh no, we won't be like that, right? We're not like that. We'll have open community, blah, blah, blah. And then, fast forward 6 months and you're like, we can no longer work together. And you're like, okay, you're going to go out there and talk the same about me. But like,
it's a pattern.
Now I understand because I'm not surprised your web developer went MIA because I want to do that right now.
It's a pattern.
Yeah.
It's a pattern with people. And then, as a result, the business is just made up of people. But yeah, it's definitely a pattern. That's a huge red flag for me now.
Now it takes a while, right? Because you're like, we can do so much better.
Well, you're always internally focused. You're always focused on what you can do. You never stop to listen to like, why are they saying that? Especially when you know the person they're talking about. And you're like, well, they're not normally like that. I don't, that's funny that they're like that, Yeah, it's because the client's crazy. We've all had that. Interesting. Be impeccable with your word. That's so simple, but like, man,
it's tough. It's really tough, especially if you're like triggered. Like it makes me think of when I was reading this again this week, what I find myself struggling with is not to take things personally, but not so much like the initial interaction, but I'm here not taking things personally. I understand like this person is a reflection of themselves and not of me. But what I'm struggling with in a certain arena is, and this is in local government, like asking questions and everyone else taking my questions personally. And that
you feel like
winds me up. No, they are. I mean, they're like,
but isn't that like what government is now?
What, a bunch of babies?
Yeah,
taking it personally,
right?
Yeah,
kind of.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of them in there. I would like to think would change. Like we can change that.
It's what the internet is.
Yes. Yeah. And so I'm like,
well, what? Explain yourself.
Yeah, I mean, I can just give concrete examples instead of being vague. So, I step into the Kershaw County Planning Commission, and I told them, before I accepted the role, you have to be nominated and then confirmed by the county council. And I was really reluctant to even accept the nomination. I was like, is this a rubber stamping committee? I'm not here for that. I said, I'm going to be asking a lot of questions to try and get a grasp of everything that's going on.
Right.
And so you're asking questions like, do we know what the housing stock is like in the county to even assess whether we have whether we have enough housing stock and whether we have the right type of housing stock? Like, you're just coming in here and building one type of home and 400 of them, and the developer's saying, oh, we need it because we have low inventory. And I'm like, well, we don't even know what inventory we need. And, the people who've been sitting on the commission for 10 years are like getting upset that we're having like questions like this, like, I mean,
well, your agenda is, making things safer for, people who use the road, not in a car.
Yeah.
Their agenda is to be a politician.
Yeah.
Right. Their agenda is to stay on that board.
Which is crazy because, I mean, we're not technically politicians. We're appointed citizens. So we were never elected,
Come on.
But I mean, this gets brought up. They're like, we're not elected officials. We don't represent the people. And I'm like, what are we here for?
What are you doing?
We're gatekeepers. And I was like, question. So then I'm like, what does that mean? And that, you see how it starts getting personal? Why are you asking me what that means? Because I don't understand what you're talking about.
We don't have the same agenda here.
No. And I'm trying to like find commonality here. And you're taking all my questions as accusations. I came in saying, the population around us, from talking to my neighbors to seeing the chatter on Facebook, is that Kershaw County is growing too quickly. We have far too many people. Our roads are in poor condition, and there's traffic everywhere. The schools are overcrowded. Our fire and our EMS can't get to everywhere. And someone's been sitting on a board for 10 years, and they're like, well, Well, I don't know. Well, I didn't know anything about this. This is the fault of the planning staff. And you're like, I'm not talking about blame. I'm saying this is where we're at.
We just want to do it. Like we want to fix the thing and go forward.
And so I'm getting triggered by that.
Yeah.
And so I'm realizing when I was reading this, don't take things personally, that I need to take a deep breath and understand that that person taking it personally is a reflection on them.
Yeah.
And then I have to stay the course. But it is very difficult, because I'm trying not to be personal, not trying to take personal digs. And everything I'm saying is like being taken personally.
Yeah.
And I just want to slide the book over. But of course, you can't do that because they would take that personally too.
Yeah.
So
yeah. That's a hard one. Yeah, because that's the thing too. We work on ourselves. We you read this book and you want to internalize it and be that, that justified warrior, but like not everyone's doing that.
Mm-mm. Especially people who are entrenched in places that are
they're
very
not.
comfortable. I've been here for 10 years,
They're
15
not.
years, 20 years. That can be in business,
Mhm.
certainly in business. I mean, most of the business owners I work with on a professional basis have been running their business for decades and they do things a certain way.
Right.
And so
Right.
as a digital marketer, you also are coming in and being like, hey, let's mix it up a little bit. And they might just be like, I've been doing this way. So, you deal with that as well. But yeah, you try and work on yourself. And sometimes it's hard to like, then be put in a position where it's not everywhere,
Mm-hmm.
which is actually the entire United States in this point in time. So
Pretty much taking it personally. I do that too. I have a hard time with I don't overthink in every aspect of my life. I mean, definitely my wife would definitely say like, you don't think about anything, but in my interpersonal relationships, I do like, like if, I'll send somebody a text and it's been like a day before they responded. I'm like, what? Like, well, clearly you're not my friend. I just had this happen. This is weird. We can go in a deep dive here.
Yeah.
But this is totally about not taking things personally. I have this student who's been out for like a month. And I use this tool called Future Me. Have you ever heard of it? So you can send yourself emails into the future.
Okay.
So one of the things, I got to back up a little bit. One of the things I practice is, because I work with Greg a lot. He makes me mad a lot. I mean, my kids do too, but like, I mean, that's any good partnership. I think if you're in agreement 100% of the time, it's probably not a good partnership. You
No,
just
because someone
agreeing with each other.
Someone, is people pleasing, and someone might be suppressing something.
Yeah. So I will write it down. Like I will write down what I want to say, or I'll record it, voice record it or whatever. And I'll sit on it for like 48 hours. Mm-hmm. And then like 48 hours, 72 hours later, if I'm still mad about it, then I'll go bring it up. Mm-hmm. Because one, it's actually making me mad or whatever. It's something I have to deal with. And two, I've had enough time to like not be reactionary. Mm-hmm. So anyway, I had this student that hadn't come to class in like a month. And so I was feeling like, what the fuck, like, what is, come on. And so I wrote myself a letter, like in this Future Me email, and I set it on, a date like a month later. And I was like, how are you feeling about this student? Are they still not coming? Like, what are you going to do? And the day it popped up, I was like, they literally texted me like 3 minutes after that email. And we're like, sorry, I've been like, my mom or something's been sick.
Yeah.
See you Monday. And I was like, wow, definitely overthought that shit.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that is tough.
Had nothing to do with me at all.
Exactly. I think that's the realization is like what people are doing is like 100% about them. And I think the way we're brought up, maybe socially or within our own families, we think otherwise. I certainly was brought up with feeling like my parents' moods were my responsibility,
Wow.
And it's a big deal to like get rid of that stuff,
Wow, you're making me like, am I just dumb? Like, is that a female thing?
I mean,
like a sensitivity of a daughter versus a son? Because I can tell you right now, I do not pay attention to that shit.
I mean, I think I can only speak from a woman's point of view here, right? I don't know what's going on with the guys, but I do think as girls were brought up always be caregivers. And I think about this.
That's why I asked. You said it way better than I could.
Exactly. And the biggest sort of best example I can give of this is, and I want to do a survey one day with a bunch of people in the room, men and women, and be like, what was your first sort of paying gig as a tween, right? When you're 10, when you're 12, 13, and you're kind of old enough to maybe walk to the neighbor's house, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I would say most girls is babysitting. You are getting paid to babysit, right?
Yeah, because you're not hiring a 13-year-old dude to babysit your kids.
Right.
I would actually like them to be alive when I come in.
And then for boys, I feel like they go into yard work.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Cutting grass.
Digging holes or something.
Exactly. Yeah. And so we are just set up for the caregiving aspect. And then you have your parents' dynamic. And
yeah, right.
My therapist gave me a book called The Adult Children of Emotionally Immature Parents. And that really was a big ringing true thing of how our parents are supposed to be the model of adults, but your parents could also be emotionally immature. And so that whole thinking that my parents' emotions were my responsibility was absolutely a side effect of my parents' emotional immaturity.
Wow. Damn.
So there's another good book if anyone's struggling with parental relationships is and my mom said that the equivalent book of her time was Adult Children of Alcoholics. There's a lot of people her age healing from being raised by alcoholics.
Sure, you get that boomer. I mean, that's all they did.
Yeah, exactly. And my parents were recovering alcoholics, right? So I never saw them drink. They were sober before they married and had children, but they were emotionally mature. So
wow. Yeah, that's deep, man. Interesting. Yeah, definitely not taking that personally. I mean, that's their problem.
Yeah, but
and you're just
so hard.
But it's not. It's my parents.
I know it's so hard as a kid. And my thing, if I'm struggling with not taking things personally, I think taking a step back and taking a breath is a good thing to get clear-headed. But I always try and think that this person is just trying to do their best, which is another of the 4 agreements. I think. For me, naturally, I'm always trying to do my best. I hope that other people are. And for me to try and understand hurtful behavior from others is I have to say they're trying to do their best. And there's likely things that we don't know what's going on. So with your student and having family illness or, anyone who suffered with depression, anxiety, a lot of times that just makes you drop off the planet. And it's hard to explain that. So I have to think you don't know what's going on. Look at this person as they're trying to do their best, and it's not about you. Yeah.
Yeah. At least start from that.
Yeah.
I mean, until proven otherwise.
Yeah. What's an example of not trying to do your best? You know what I mean?
I don't know. I mean, that's the thing. They wouldn't even meet you in the first place. Yeah. When I think of someone like that, a student, they wouldn't have even. I never would have met them. They're not really trying to do their best. I mean, that's the whole point. So don't make assumptions.
This is really good. And I think that was when I first read this book, it was something that made me change my behavior right away.
Yeah, that's solid.
Because in order to not make assumptions, you have to ask questions. And so I feel again, stepping into the county planning commission, I was I'm going to ask a ton of questions. And they don't, and some people aren't liking that, but the trap you fall into if you're making assumptions again is oh, why is this person acting this way? Well, it's because blah 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 in your head, and you don't know that. Literally, you have no idea. And so, just asking questions and clarifying questions is super important. I even did it in a prospect call yesterday. This prospect's going on and on and on. And I was just I need to ask you some clarifying questions because I don't want to assume that this. Yeah. So I think that's a really good one because we can make entire stories up in our head about, so-and-so looked at me this way and it's because they haven't texted me and I'm sure they're mad at me and blah, 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 blah. And I'm you don't know that.
I feel you're always, I don't know, this is not deep. It just popped in my head, but whatever thing you're doing is you're gonna base it on the last thing you just dealt with. You know what I mean? So for example, we got a message from a client that was hey, can you make us a report about what you've been doing for the past 12 months for this monthly thing that we pay you? And we were oh, they're gonna sue us. Immediately, that's an extreme, but we immediately went to we got to cover our ass. But they just wanted to know. Like it was
Mhm.
nothing. There's nothing malicious there. It was just like shit. We haven't been paying attention. You
Mhm.
know. I feel like that can happen, like because like the last client interaction we had before that, they were like accusatory about something. We were like,
Mhm.
bro, we don't know what you're talking about.
Mhm.
Like, and so the next one we were like, well, that one's accusing us too.
Mhm.
And so the third one you'd be like, we're going to jail. Like I don't know how bad it would get, but like I feel like we do that, and we do that with people too. Like if you just had a bad interaction with a human,
Mhm.
the very next one you're like, back off. Like I'm watching you.
Yeah. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
don't know if you're like that.
Yeah. I think um yeah, I think too much about like how the other person is perceiving me, and the reality is I have zero control over that.
Mhm.
So I can definitely think like that. Like I'll be in my own world and walk by someone and maybe not acknowledge them, and then I'm like, oh fuck,
Yeah, they think I'm.
I didn't wave at that person. I didn't look, or I didn't smile at them, and they're probably gonna hate me. But they don't know that I'm thinking about this,
Yeah.
and it's just like, just try your best, Fiona. Like smile at the next person that goes by.
Well, that's a whole thing for women too, right?
Oh my god,
The
yes,
smiling at people. Has anybody ever
absolutely.
told you should
Oh
smile
my
more?
god, really? Yeah, really? Oh my god, do you want to hear some smile stories?
Sure.
Um, so, it used to happen all the time. It happened all the time, and I used to not say anything about it. Um, and then the like that Me Too movement really came up
Now I
about
can say things.
5 years ago of
Mhm.
like speaking out. And yeah, I had someone at the pool would be like, "Smile," and I was just like, "Really? Are we still doing that?" I had like, I went into the grocery store and this guy was next to me. He was like, "Smile," and I was like, you know what I love more than anything when I go to the grocery store? I love it when a man I don't know tells me to smile when I'm trying to pick up lemons. And he's like, "Geez, I'm just trying to be nice." I'm like, ask your wife if that's a nice thing to do to
Well,
someone.
you're not being nice.
Yeah, like I didn't ask you. So yeah, totally. I mean, and just to give some perspective as to like, there's feminist writers who've done deep dives into why this is disturbing, and it's good to clarify why it's painful for women. And it's the idea that we are supposed to be a certain way to please men,
Right.
the
Oh, I
male
get it.
gaze,
100% I get it. Yeah.
And it's like another litmus test I have is like, would you say that to a man? And if the answer is no, then you're
Of
being
course not.
exactly. Would you
That
tell a guy to smile? No, but
dude might punch you.
and it generally happens when I'm dressed a bit nicer. Like in the grocery
Mm,
store, I just come from a
interesting.
friend's wedding shower, so I was looking nice. I only shop in like sweats and a hoodie now, and nobody talks to me.
Just wear a beanie cap and
A beanie and a hoodie,
yeah.
yes, like it's all head to toe, and it does stop men from talking to you.
Mhm. Mhm.
But again, it falls into like it to me. It validates that critique that a man saying that subconsciously is because he thinks that you should be pleasing to
Yeah,
him
you
in a
should be
certain
happy.
way.
Yeah. I don't
And
wanna see you upset.
yeah, and it's like maybe I'm not upset, maybe, and that's the thing.
Maybe
Nine
this is
times
how
out
I
of ten,
am.
yeah, 9 times out of 10, I'm not upset. But I had one time I was walking down the street in
Yeah.
Glasgow, like upset. I'd just been broken up with, and
Yeah.
this guy was like, "Smile," and I'm like, "Fuck
Fuck you.
you!"
Well,
Like,
even the term like RBF, right?
yes,
Even that's sort of like, not doesn't mean I'm a bitch. I mean, I'm just
right,
not smiling at you, dude.
I know.
Well, I teach a lot of women's self-defense classes,
Mhm,
and that's one of the first things we talk about is like you don't have to make someone happy.
mhm,
Like, and predators will use that to their advantage.
mhm.
I mean, you probably know that. You're smart. I mean, you take care of yourself, but like they can sort of weaponize your niceness
Yes.
to trick you or whatever. And you can say no. You can not even talk to them.
Yeah.
You just whatever you want to do. Like it's you don't yeah.
But that's hard. A lot of us women were not conditioned that way. I was not brought up that way by
Well,
my
that's the whole
father.
point is that you're worried about like what they think.
Mhm.
You care about what they think. You're making this assumption that you're like, well, they're gonna think I'm mean or whatever. Who gives
Absolutely.
a shit?
I know, I get called mean all the time. I'm an older sister, and so, my husband calls me older sister, and he's the youngest, and so I'm like, "You married an older sister. That's on
Yeah,
you."
dude. Yeah.
Just like it's on me that I married the baby of the family. You're being a real baby about this right now.
That's funny.
But I mean, it's hard. It is hard as women to say no, and sometimes I feel like some of the job opportunities that come to me, are men who consciously or subconsciously think they can manipulate me to do work that I'm not interested in doing.
Ugh.
Like they think, oh, like the prospect I spoke to yesterday, like I was trying hard to make that something that was going to be good, but it was not. And I was just like, look, this is basically my boundary, but I didn't say boundary. I was like, this is what it takes to work with me. And this is the work that we do. And if it doesn't work for you, it's not a good fit. And he's like, well, this is what I need. And I'm like, well, that's not what we are.
Yeah.
You know, but it's so hard because you get told things like, you know, you catch more flies with honey or whatever. But I'm like, there's a lot of flies on shit as well. So
there's a lot of flies on corpses.
But I was always told to like, you know, smile and you get compared to like, well, why can't you be more like this woman? And there was a particular woman in my community that I've been told to be more like, who's literally a former beauty queen. And I'm like, we are not the same person. Like,
goodness.
She does great work and more power to her, but I'm not a beauty queen.
Yeah, that's not cool.
And so it's hard, but you know, you try and I'm 40 now, so I feel like I'm like breaking out of the conditioning. I'm
tired of this shit.
Exactly. I'm kind of like getting beyond that. Right. I wear, you know, nasty clothes to the supermarket most times. So
I mean, you're not on this earth to please everybody. It's just sort of a thing you need to deal with, I think. You touched on it, but always do your best. Sort of like the fourth agreement, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what do you make of that one?
I think what's good for that, especially for maybe someone who's in competitive spaces like athletics or business, is to understand that you're doing your best that you can on that day. So like today I am like bunged up with allergy craziness, so I'm not like feeling hot, but I'm trying to do my best. But I'm also trying to check with myself to see if I'm doing too much, because you know, I feel like I'm firing at 50% today, whereas another day I could be at 80 or 90%.
Well, I think you're doing great.
Thank you. I made this a priority, so you're going to get all the 50%, and then I'm going to go home and go to sleep.
Nice.
But that's what's important. And I think, again, like understanding that people are in different places, and so they may be doing their best, and not to compare their best with your best. Their best might be a lot better than you that day, or their best might be a lot worse. And this is a little bit controversial. Thinking about, like, I really don't I try to get away from the concepts of like good and bad and like good and evil, right? And then you get into like, well, some things are really evil, like someone murdered someone, right?
Yeah.
And I'm like, I get that, but like, could you not put yourself in a position where the best they could do at that moment was to kill someone? I mean, that's like a horrible thought.
Yeah, that's pretty far out there, but
right. And just understand like the craziness around someone to be in that position. I don't like another one. Well, this less controversial because it is hard to like sympathize with a murderer, but I could sympathize with a woman who killed a man who was trying to rape her, right?
Yep.
But like stealing stuff, right? There's a lot of robbery that happens right now. I don't think most people who are stealing stuff grow up being like, I want to be a robber, right?
Right.
You know what I mean? Like that glamorous lifestyle. It's like they're in a bad place, and that is what's happening. Right. And so, you know, I think about those sort of moral quandaries, especially like with the idea, you know, I've had stuff stolen from me, and it's just stuff. So like in the hierarchy of things that are important, you can have my stuff, my private property over my life or my husband's life or my animal's life, you know? And I think we need to get a little bit more of a grip and get our humanity around that, because the things that I see people say, at least online, about someone who steals a set of iPods,
I know.
is like really inhuman. And I'm thinking like, could you not ever put yourself in a situation where you were struggling? And, you know, our society right now is not very sympathetic to people who are struggling. They tell them like, you just need to work harder and pull yourself up by your bootstraps. Well, like if you got to pay, if you're starving and you got to eat and you see something, you can turn a quick buck, or you can steal food from the food store. I've seen someone steal food and I didn't report it. And I stood there in line like questioning what I should do. And I'm glad I never said anything. But the initial reaction was like, that person's stealing food.
Yeah.
But then it's like, it's food. Like,
you don't know their story.
No.
I know. I look at the because I've had 2 kids. I look at the formula that they have under lock and key. You know, and it's like, well, that's fucked up. But it's next to the cigarettes that are under lock and key. So I'm like, I don't understand what I can't put myself in this position. So I don't know. Yeah, I think in this book, if they never mention it specifically, but I feel like empathy is sort of a connecting tissue between the 4 agreements, and it's hard to cultivate empathy. You know, I mean, it's easy to have empathy for someone that you love. You know, or even a family member. I mean, if you don't love them, but like a family member, someone you're connected to, it's easy to have empathy, but it's hard to have that for complete strangers.
Yeah. And I think we need to cultivate that a little bit more.
Yeah. And you're definitely not going to get it online.
No, absolutely not.
You get the worst of humanity.
Yeah, the worst of humanity is online and on our roads behind the wheel of a car. And that's true. Like, like it is. I mean, I'm the worst. I'm Fiona's worst when she's behind the wheel of a car and I'm in a hurry because this car is supposed to go fast and you're going slow in the fast lane. What are you doing? You know what I mean? Like, it is.
I don't deal well in traffic.
Who does?
I can't stand a red light. But I will tell you something that helps ground me. Was when my oldest started learning how to drive and how nervous he was. And then now my youngest is starting to learn how to drive and he's pretty nervous. And when I see someone, like, I still don't like red lights, but whenever I see someone like kind of not doing things the right way, I immediately think, well, maybe that's a 16-year-old kid.
Yeah.
And they're scared shitless.
Yeah.
Or like maybe I shouldn't honk at them.
Yeah. Or maybe like our signage is so shit that like anyone who doesn't live here for 10 years doesn't know that you're supposed to turn left like 10 minutes ago. You know, like I got way out of the wrong place on the New Jersey Turnpike.
Oh, that's probably.
Yeah. And so like, that is horrible. You're like, I know. I'm like, I need to be in the lane 5 lanes over there. And oh my God, I'm getting off here. And so we've all been there. But yeah, we do need to have a little bit more patience. But
I think so.
But it's I got every single red light coming in here today. So that was just in the universe telling me to slow down.
Yeah, my kid was late to school today because of that same thing. Goddamn red lights. But yeah, but that kid's probably doing their best. They really don't want to wreck their car.
Yeah, and
I'm just gonna honk at them. That's kind of like, come on.
I mean, and it's the same with like when I was driving in this morning, and I just left my neighborhood. I have to get on Route 601 for like a mile and a half to get to I-20. 601 is like a arterial road. It's 4 lanes. There's a lot of trucks on it. It's very fast. It's also going downhill, so it's like 45 speed limit, but everyone's going 60, and they're all going to the interstate. And these trucks are getting over in the left lane for some reason. I'm like, I wonder what's up there. And it was a guy riding his bike. And so, you know, I have sympathy because I've ridden that road to prove a point, but I would never like recreationally ride this road. But this guy was doing it for transportation. He didn't have, you know, the spandex on and the helmet. He was doing his best.
He just got to get to work.
He just got to get to the work. And I don't have anger towards him because I'm a cyclist as well. And I have a huge amount of empathy. But when people get upset about that, either because they're getting slow or they'll be like, this dumbass isn't wearing a helmet, you know, or like cyclists, y'all need to have lights and bright clothes and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, there's people who can't afford that. There's people who don't have helmets because they can't afford it.
They're on a bike because it's all they have.
Exactly. And we need to just be aware of that, you know, and not think like, oh man, why would they choose to ride a bike? Why aren't they driving a car? Well, how much does a car cost?
I'm sure that's
you know, like it sucks. Like it is expensive. And I've seen even like, you know, these sort of like gestures, they put them on the news to try and make us feel better, where they're like, this kid was walking 4 miles to work every day, and so his coworkers got together and bought him a car, which sounds really great, but then it's like, who's paying for the rest of it? I mean, this guy's got to pay insurance and all the taxes. Exactly. So
hope he's employed.
Oh gosh,
did you get him a job?
I know. And so yeah, there's like we gotta, even when someone else's best looks very different from our situation, I think it's very good to just take a breather and say, okay, think about if this person is trying to do their best and look at it that way.
I had some notes that I took down, things that I took away from the book myself, but I think we covered most of them, except for this one about the importance of self-awareness or working on your self-awareness. Like, we just need to do more of that.
Yeah.
Come on, guys. There's the whole reason we have this podcast. How do you deal with someone when you clearly can tell that they're not working on themselves?
That's a trigger for me. It's a struggle.
When you can see it. You're like, bro, you got a lot of work to do.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, my thing has been like, hand them this book, but I mean, again, not always receptive. I don't know. I that's something I struggle with. I don't know if I have a really good answer besides, thinking about, okay, this person's trying to do their best, but yeah, it's hard. And generally the people who are close to me in my life are not those people. You tend to, that your closer people tend to be on similar journeys as you, and you can be an example to other people. Like they say in therapy about like when families need to heal, sometimes you're the person who starts that process, and it gets the other people in your family to make us think about things differently or go to therapy or whatever. But when you're out in the world, I don't know, it's really hard. Tough. Yeah. What do you think, Gene?
I struggle with it too. I usually don't interact with them.
Sometimes we don't have that luxury.
No. Well, I think about that a lot. I think about like, I will tell you this. This is another rabbit hole, I guess. But so I about 2 years ago, I bought my business partner out, bought his gym. And I also teach. I teach martial arts. I've done that. This is going on year 7, by the way, which is kind of crazy in my brain. But so I've got this gym, which is a commercial entity. I mean, it needs like members, it needs marketing, it needs all that shit. And I don't like that part.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a job.
Yeah.
But then teaching the martial arts is like my favorite thing in the world to do. And so I've sort of like figured out a way to jam that in there, to where I don't have to market that thing, but I do have to work on the gym thing to give this thing a home. But I'm able to sort of separate it. The reason I mention that is because one of the things I struggle with is the reason why I do things, right? Because if you can, it's real easy to sit there and say, well, I would teach someone if it was just one person, or I would teach someone even if they didn't have the money to pay me to teach them because of my love of doing it. But that's not really true.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? There are certain parameters that have to be met. So it's hard to deal with those people. And my whole point is like continuously checking yourself to like, why am I interacting with this person? Do I have an agenda?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And part of that is like, if I have an agenda, they should know what it is. And because if they don't, and I'm selling them something else, but I really have this other agenda, then I'm not really being honest.
Yeah. I don't know. That's tough.
I mean, I think about that all the time.
Yeah.
And yeah, I don't know that I do a good job with it because I do have an agenda. I mean, I'm doing it because it makes me happy.
But that's okay, isn't it?
I hope so.
I mean, that makes me think of like, I haven't read the fullness of Adam Smith's The Wealth of Nations, right? A fellow alumnus of Glasgow University, by the way. So, but I think one of his premises, actually his like enlightenment moment and the change that he made is to say that humans act solely on self-interest, right? And I believe that to an extent, but I think there's other reasons because I don't know. I mean, I think my self-interest is that I want more people around me to be happy because the more people around me that are happy makes me happy. Like I personally, the self-interest part can be taken to the extreme where you only focus on yourself.
Right. We see people do that in business all the time.
And that's what I'm saying. And they hold up like, Adam Smith is like, this guy who Adam Smith did think that the state should like stop the ills of monopoly and stuff like that. So we're not really doing what Adam Smith said, but yeah, that whole like greed is good thing that came out in the 80s. And so only focusing on your comfort and your happiness to the detriment of others is a hard concept for me. And it doesn't work for me. Maybe it works for some people, but I think it's like, a bad thing. So you're saying like, I'm trying to sell this person on my gym, even though I might not particularly like them, but yeah. I mean, it's tough. I mean, I struggle with like, doing the digital marketing thing. Like I want to do digital marketing for people that have businesses and organizations that are doing good work. My client roster is very small right now, so everyone does kind of fit into that mold.
Right.
But, the only thing that I make money from is FGM internet marketing. Yet I'm having like, 3-hour meetings with my county councilman yesterday, and I'm doing this podcast, which are things that I like really love doing. Like I came out energized from that.
Yeah.
But then partly guilty, so I'm not getting paid for it. But I'm coming to the realization is I'm not going to get paid for it. So I have to like take the medicine of doing the digital marketing that allows me to go and do this other stuff that I truly love. And then I also question like I'm into herbalism and growing medicinal herbs and slowly learning like the powers of herbs, and immediately someone will be like, oh, you should open a shop. And like I'm doing this with the express reason of not selling it, like
it'll crush it.
Exactly. Like I do not want to become a commercial herbalist at all,
because then it's a job.
Right. Exactly. So I have to keep in mind that like, okay, you got to keep the FGM internet marketing going because that's what's paying the bills and allowing you to do the stuff that you love. Because you do worry the stuff that you love could be corrupted if it became
you'll approach it completely differently,
the commercial aspect.
But I promise you will.
Yeah.
How could you not?
Right, because you're like, oh, I'm not selling enough of this,
Right. I mean, it's it's the same thing. I mean, I'm sure I don't remember your story specifically, but I can talk about mine. When I first got into doing web design stuff, I was working a job and I started building the website for them. And then I was like, cool, I'll do I did it for free.
Yeah.
Now I'd be like, I'm not even touching my computer unless I'm on the clock,
Exactly. Yeah.
But it's because of all the years of like making it commercial, and I'm with you with the herbalism thing. I don't want the martial arts to become that where I'm like letting people in that are like, you don't really fit, I don't want to do that.
I think we should have more conversations about that in our society, because I do also think like there is an assumption. This is me making assumptions, right? About what other people think. Here we go. Fiona's not following the book.
Burn the book.
I know, thinking that a lot of the work that I do, the activism work, that somehow we're getting paid for it. And it's like, no, like nobody, George Soros is not writing me a check right now. You know what I mean? Like there's no money. The only reason I can do it is because this commercial thing, the FGM internet marketing, is what's making me able to pay my bills. But there is an aspect of our current society that devalues anything that's not paid labor. Why would you do it if you weren't getting paid?
What's the point? Yeah.
And it's like, is there no joy in your life that's like not getting paid, And that actually falls into like the devaluation of like domestic work of women and caregiving and stuff like that. It's like that's a huge amount of unpaid labor, and some of the most important labor in our society is caring for others.
100%.
And mothers are not getting paid, and child caregivers are not getting paid for taking care of their parents and that sort of thing. And it absolutely is like a sad state, and it we saw it all during COVID of like how important caregiving is.
Oh right, man.
And
well, I think we're going to, speaking of caregiving, I mean, we're going to be doing a lot more of that as the generation right before us gets older and older.
Yeah. And
they outnumber us.
and we've set up this crazy system. Like, and I just had to deal with this with my father's like prolonged illness and then his death 1.5 years ago. Him and his wife were getting old and frail and having falls and stuff like that. And, I even said to him, like, if things were different, if I had a bigger house, if we had a multi-generational house, I'd stick you in the granny flat and you'd eat what I was cooking, right? You know what I mean? You'd have your own life, But just like my dogs get fed on a regular schedule
Yeah.
and then they do what they want, like you would be getting fed and there'd be someone to look over you and you'd live your life like that. But we don't have that. It
Not in
is like,
America. No.
first of all, my father and his wife would be like, never accept that come down from independence to move in with their children. But then my father would never expect to even move into like independent living, you know, which is like the step before the assisted living, and they're in the same like facility, right? But I think it's a real shame that we don't have that set up.
Yeah, you got to pay for that.
It's expensive.
You got to pay for that.
Yeah.
You do a lot more FGM for that. That's for sure.
Yeah, but I mean, there's part of me that's like I love cooking, but I struggle to find the time because I'm trying to make money, right?
Yeah,
And then I'm like, you know what? Would I be happier if I didn't have to make money and I could just caregive? I'd probably be happy for a little while, and then I'd be like, "Fuck this! Why am I taking care of everybody? Why is anyone taking care of me?" So you know.
Well, I mean, yeah. That's part of the self-awareness thing, right? It's. I mean, yeah. I've got a lot of friends that are just unhappy, but they don't. And I've talked to them, and they don't know why they're unhappy.
Yeah. And that's when you got to go deep. And sometimes when you go deep, it makes you more unhappy. Like I feel like I started like the journey, and then the journey took me way deep and I got really depressed, you know? Yeah. But sometimes you need that to like really kick the bottom and get through the scars and then try and grapple your way up with an understanding of like, this made me very unhappy. And if you can't name what would make you happy or content, then you'll never find it, you know? So that's where I'm like, what makes me happy? Being outside in the backyard with my animals. Well, yesterday I didn't get to do that at all. So I was unhappy yesterday, you know, and I'm like, Fiona, you got to like take the time to go out and talk to the chickens, you know?
You do. You do 100%. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what to do with all these people that are unhappy, but you can do that. I mean, you can look into yourself. And do you struggle with loneliness?
Yeah, I do, because my sort of like childhood mechanism of when I was upset was to retreat because my parents were just not available. Because usually I was upset because my parents had done something.
Yeah.
And so if my mom yelled at me and then she was like, "Oh, come here, let me give you a hug," I was like, "No," you know? So I didn't learn like good coping mechanisms. And so a lot of what I've worked through in the past couple of years in my personal therapy and in couples therapy is that when I'm feeling down, I need to reach out. And the thing is, me and my husband are the same in that way. When we're feeling down, we just isolate because you are attracted to the person who's just like you. You know, you're like, I'm not going to marry someone who's like my dad. And then like 10 years later, you're like, oh my God,
you're my dad.
I know. You're like, I just did the same patterns. And so part of like you growing, you actually have to get your life partner to kind of get on board as well. And so,
they have to grow too.
So the biggest loneliness for me is like being in a house with someone and feeling alone. That's like really, I would rather be by myself and be like, okay, I'm physically alone. And so, it's hard because you feel like, for me, you know, I can feel like the down times might be a burden on someone. Again, making assumptions, right? But
if they love you, they're there to help you.
Yeah.
And you have to let them.
And you have to tell them that you need help. That's the other thing is we're like assuming that they know you need help and they might not.
My wife's great. She's always there, but it's always like, I'm falling apart.
Yeah.
You know, and it's like, well, why didn't you say something a fucking month ago?
Yes. Yeah, because you always think I'll get through it. This is just
would have been a lot easier. Now we have a bunch of shit to deal with.
Yeah.
Way to go, dude.
So, I mean, both me and my husband are trying to be more open and like, you know, walk that path. And I mean, we certainly have the tests. Like, I felt very lonely. Something that made me, I think, go into depression was when I had to have one of my dogs put down in October 2020. And when me and my husband first got together, I had my dog and he had his dog. Now, of course, as a family, I feel like they're our dogs, but he very much was like, that's your dog, that's your decision. And so I felt utterly alone. And for me, I was still in that stage of like, I'm depressed, I'm just going to bed. And it was just a bad spiral. Well, now we still have his dog, who's our dog, but she's 18 and she had a cardiac event on Wednesday.
Yeah.
And so I'm trying to walk that path of like, can we talk about it? Can we have a hug? Can we cry about it? You know? So it's cool to talk about it, but walking it is a whole different thing, and you have to be super self-aware and be like, okay, my comfort zone is to not talk about this, but
Yeah.
that's not served me well. So
Right.
let's try and like breach the subject so that we're not going through this alone, because there's no reason to go through that alone. You're together, and it
Or
is
just
very
like
hard.
create an argument for the sake of whatever.
Yeah, that morning started as an argument, and then we united over the dog.
Right?
You know, because
That's how it
you're
works.
like, that's more important than whatever this mood is, because I was snoring because I have allergies, you know.
It's a whole thing, man.
Yeah.
Relationships are complex, but I do think that it's important to work on a level of self-awareness, and I think a lot of our problems are because we don't.
Yeah, because
Or we stop doing it.
we stop doing it. We don't do it. I hear, great things about some schools that are teaching mindfulness. Like, that'd be awesome if we learned stuff like that growing up, like ways to self-soothe and all that. We were just talking before we were recording about like ADD culture.
Oh yeah.
I mean,
right.
what way to not address
That's a
yourself
whole,
is that all of our entertainment is like, blah, like it is so easy to not pay attention to what's going on. I feel bad, I'm going to turn on Real Housewives, because that always makes me feel better, because they got way bigger problems than I do.
Or what I notice is people will be watching that show or a show that's mindless and scrolling mindlessly at the same time, and it's just like, whoa.
I find myself doing it, and I'm like, what is going on? And I really, like, my sister a few years ago was like, I'm taking a break from social media, I feel like I'm doing it too much. And I'm like, I understand that concept, but I don't feel like I'm doing it. And now I feel like I feel a little bit down about, I don't know, an email I got didn't go the way I wanted, and then I'm like, just and it's like there is some dopamine hit or something that you're looking for, and 90% of the time you don't get it. You know what I mean?
But now you're numb to it. It's just like 1,000 of them, where it used to take like a couple, now it takes 1,000.
Yeah, and like ridiculous. I used to, just follow people I know, and now I'm like, what's all this stuff in my feed from people I don't know who they are, and a lot of it's disturbing stuff, like the amount of trauma that we see on our TVs.
Oh, it's crazy, right?
And on social media is like shocking. Like, I heard a podcast recently talking about like collective trauma, and like, even if you didn't, like, if you see like a police brutality video, even though you didn't experience that trauma personally, you watching it is trauma.
Oh, sure.
And we are like collectively traumatized every single night on the news right now. It is very hard. I don't want to be one of those people who's like, I don't watch the news.
It feels like it.
But I'm pretty much there, because it is trauma
during the whole, like, most of the Trump administration, I was like following every single time. I mean, he's polarizing, of course, whether you love him or hate him. You have to admit that he was very loud on social media and stuff. And every time he would just poop out a tweet, it was like the world reaction. Yeah. And I was addicted to that. And towards the end of it, I think it was actually towards the, I'm going to say end of COVID. That doesn't make any sense. But you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like when we started going back to the office and stuff, I like just turned all that shit off. Quit watching the news.
Yeah.
I feel a lot better.
Yeah. Yeah.
And now, like, I forget what I was doing. I just went to like CNN and pulled it up, and I was like, all of these articles are like terror-inducing, world-ending events. Every single article. Yeah. I'm like, what in the fuck is going on?
I mean, it is exactly. It's like I kind of want to. I think for me, what I've been doing is trying to like focus on that local level, because I'm like, these things that are going on, like I have zero control over. I mean, the Willow Project in Alaska, which makes me want. It just hurts my freaking heart that we're doing that stuff, right? But like, I literally can't do anything. But like, the gold mine up in Kershaw might be poisoning the people up there. Like, let's go test some water and like
that's
try
way
and
more
figure
important.
some shit out.
Way more important, yeah.
And I think it's this cycle of having like an anxiety and depressed ridden culture, and the only way you make yourself happy is to buy stuff, and that's our consumer culture.
Interesting, yeah. Right? That's why Amazon's just one click away.
I know. And I mean, it's like, I try hard not to do, and we do not have a delivery every day. No, but like, I didn't buy clothes for like a long time, like, cause I was just like not into it. And luckily I'd stayed the same size. And then a year and a half ago to now, I've put on weight. So I need to buy new clothes. And like, I got the little buzz when I got the new clothes in the mail, but that buzz is really short. So I can see how you're just like more, buy.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
yeah, you start to see a pattern. You start to see the system work when
Mhm.
you remove yourself from it. I
Mhm.
recently spent a week in the woods.
Mm. Awesome.
Like for real, like no phone,
Mhm.
no communication.
Mhm.
Um, it took me 3 days to not think about checking something on my phone.
Yeah.
3 entire days, like 72 hours of like, you just be sitting there in the woods, no reason. You'd be like, well, let me look that up. Like
Yeah.
just some thought in your head. I'm like, well, that's crazy. It's like part of your brain.
Mhm.
Um, and so yeah, when I came out, I just deleted. Like I deleted Instagram, deleted
Mhm.
TikTok, deleted Facebook off my phone. And I was like, because I thought about it and I was like, man, I still have to use these things for business.
I know.
And I'm like, you know what? I can use my laptop.
Mhm.
So now I only, like, if you see me post anything or
Mhm.
whatever, I use my phone to make videos,
Mhm.
and then I post it on my laptop because I want that separation between my brain and that phone. It was really scary. Like and I was in the woods with someone else. Like
Mhm.
it was a group of us, and I just remember talking to them like, dude, I still, like, I'm talking to you and I still feel like I need to look something up on my phone to
Yeah.
explain it.
Yeah.
And he's like, yeah, me too. I keep checking my pocket for like whatever's
What?
happening on Facebook.
Yeah.
You just get this little like,
Oh,
what's going on? And you're like, I need to see.
I know. It's really hard. It is. I would struggle with that. When we went over to Scotland, part of going back to Tyree is like going back in time, and our phones don't work, which
I
is
saw the pictures.
awesome. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. But so like that was even my husband was like, "I'd like to go back there," and I was like, "Yay!" But I mean, I wish we had somewhere that didn't cost so much money to get to and
Yeah.
take so long. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
it shouldn't be like let's fly across the ocean, right?
Yeah.
So I'd love to find the ability or have the self-control to like stick your phones in a box with a lock on it that had a timer.
Man, I know.
So that you wouldn't do it because I do agree like taking that sort of mental break would be beneficial for me.
I
Absolutely.
recommend it. We're like, there's a weekend in April we already have planned, and I'm like gonna leave mine in the car the whole time.
That'd be
I'm gonna
awesome.
lock it in the glove box and just leave it.
Well, sometimes I reminisce because like the phones were not this way like when I was in college, which I'm grateful for. That means there's like no social
I
media
know. I'm
college
like,
days, right?
yeah. Well, yeah, for other reasons.
But I mean, I remember being at a party and some guy was like, "You're wrong about this," and there was no, "Let me pull
Oh
out
yeah.
my phone." That's the one time I was like, "I wish I had it," because I remembered it because I was still hung up on being right or wrong, which luckily I don't give a shit anymore. If you think I'm wrong, that's fine. Doesn't matter. Um,
Well,
but I had to go home. And the next day, when I logged into my laptop, I
you're
was
like,
like, "Let
shit,
me
I'm wrong.
Google
Yeah.
this," and I was like, "I was right, motherfucker!" Like,
You want to call it back? By the
I
way,
know I was right, but
well,
like,
you're a Gen Xer, right?
I'm like the top end of millennial.
Okay,
In
but
1982.
at 82, yeah, my brother's 80. I mean, we'll give you that, right? You're before Facebook.
Yeah,
Um,
Facebook came out when I was like
yeah, so
26.
yeah.
Yeah.
So I notice, because like in the gym we'll be teaching class or whatever, and we have like, Gen Xers and up, and then we have like millennials,
Mhm.
and like something will come up where you're like, well, what the hell was that? Or what was that guy's name in that movie or whatever? And all the people that are like Gen Xers and up will just be like, I'm gonna try to think about this. That's gonna bother me all day. And everybody else is like,
IMDb.
it's right here.
Yep.
And you're like, I don't want to. I find myself like, I don't want to see it. I want to try to remember. They're like, you're an idiot. Why don't you just look it up? And I'm like, no, it's a thing. Like, trust me. I want to remember. I
Well,
don't want to have to look this shit up.
well, that's like, I mean, I remember looking for flats in Glasgow in the early 2000s, and you had what was called an A to Z or an A to Z.
A to Z.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is like it's a little booklet with a very detailed map of the city, and you would it was all broken up into little grids, and so instead of folding out a big map, you would flip to the page and look it up. So
Mhm.
I would like the way we would get a flat back in the day is there was a certain stores like on the street where most of the students were that had like advertisements, 2-bedroom flat, 600 quid a month, blah blah blah,
Mm.
and you would write all that down. And then you'd go back to your
Oh, yeah.
dorm and you would get on the phone, the landline,
Mhm.
and you would call them and you would make appointments and then you'd get your A to Z and like walk there. But
I feel you.
But I used to be able to get around anywhere. If I had to do anything with a map, like I would learn it.
Yep.
Now I got to put Google Map. I got a Google Map to go to the freaking grocery store. You know what I mean? Like I don't
even bother.
I don't know. Like I have no brain space for knowing how to get around Colombia. It's taken me 10 years to like figure out where anything is.
For real, the first like 3 or 4 years of my business, God, I don't even remember what year it was. 25 years ago, whatever. It was right around the time when they were just starting to put GPSs in cars, right? And up until then, and I was poor. Like I mean, I'm not poor, but like I don't have a GPS. My car doesn't have it, and I'm not going to buy one.
It's fancy.
So I went to Dallas to do business. We were expanding into Dallas, and I went there. And one of the people we'd hired was already there, and so I went, and they were like, "How did you just got here from the air?" Because I just got to the airport, got the car, drove there, and they were like, "How the hell?" I'm like, "Well, I use this thing called a," and they were just like, "Wow, you can read a map of Dallas?" I'm like, "Yeah, it's a map," but they were just like, "You don't have a GPS?" You know, I'm like, "No, I don't have a GPS. Like, I don't need one of those."
He used to give directions like, "Okay, when you take 521 into here, and you go through 4 stoplights, and then you take a right-hand turn."
But now I'm like terrified if Google doesn't work.
Yes,
we'll never find it.
I know.
I will never get out of here.
I know.
I'm like, what? Yeah. In fact, when I was telling you, I spent a week in the woods. It was part of a martial arts thing, and so I have my car. I just got a new one, but it was old. It didn't have a GPS or anything in it, and so we took that like specifically. And the person who was sort of like proctoring the whole week, he just gave us like a map. And that was part of the test, was to get from like up in North Carolina to Chesterfield, like via just a map. And we got so fucking lost. So lost. And we were like, this map is so stupid. Like, well, it's a map. It's like, it's got the roads on it. I don't know why we can't follow this. It was real funny.
It is fun though to like put yourself into situations. Like me and my husband went to Havana, Cuba in 2017. And so no phones working, no access to like cash machines or ATMs. Had to order an Havana map from Amazon to take with me. I loved it. It was awesome. Like I'm like, I know where we are. It only took like 2-3 walks out of the apartment we were renting to like know your orientation and be like, head that direction. It was awesome.
That's legit. So yeah, just get a map and everything's good. Thank you for that book.
Yeah.
Do I need to give it back to you?
No, you don't. Okay. I have so many copies. Yeah.
I appreciate it. I think I'm going to read it like you do often. It's a quick read. I'll make sure and we link it up. Use the link in the post. Buy it. But thank you. Appreciate it.
No, thank you. It was good talk. Yeah.
Awesome.